I'll sleep in the stable. I'll do anything, rancher, please. I'll be your wife." The sun had barely begun to rise over the wide-open fields when she arrived at the ranch. Her clothes were dusty, and her shoes were worn from walking miles along the uneven dirt roads. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold but from the nervous anticipation that had been building inside her for days. She had nowhere else to go. Her family had turned her away, claiming she was a burden, and the town offered no kindness to someone in her situation. The thought of being alone in the world made her chest ache, and yet she kept walking, determined to reach the one place that still held a glimmer of hope. The ranch was quiet in the early morning. Horses neighed softly from their stalls, and a gentle wind rustled the tall grass across the open fields. The main house stood tall and sturdy, a symbol of hard work and resilience. She paused at the edge of the property, taking a deep breath, trying to gather the courage that had brought her here. She had heard stories about the rancher, about his strength, his fairness, and his unwillingness to be swayed by emotional pleas. Still, she had no choice. If she wanted to survive, if she wanted even the smallest chance of safety and stability, she had to speak to him. Her steps were hesitant as she approached the farmhouse. The sound of her footsteps on the gravel seemed louder than it should, each crunch echoing her fear and uncertainty. She could see him now, the rancher, tall and strong, moving with practiced ease as he inspected the fields. His face was rugged, weathered by years of sun and wind, and his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail around him. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should turn back, but the thought of spending another night on the cold, empty road steeled her resolve. Taking another deep breath, she called out, her voice soft but filled with urgency. "Excuse me, sir, please." The rancher looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and caution. He studied her from a distance, noting her disheveled appearance and the desperation in her eyes. She took another step forward, her voice trembling. I don't have anywhere to go. Please, I'll work. I'll do anything. I'll even sleep in the stable. Please, just let me stay." For a moment, there was silence. The rancher said nothing, simply observing her, as if weighing her words carefully. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she looked pitiful and she hated it, but she had no other option. Her pride had been stripped away by circumstance, and all that was left was the raw need to survive. I promise I won't be a burden," she added quickly, seeing the faint frown that creased his face. "I'll work hard. I can feed the animals, clean the stalls, cook, anything you need. I just need a place to stay, even if it's just for one night." The rancher continued to study her. He was not a man easily moved by words alone. He had seen many people come and go, some seeking help, others seeking handouts, and very few had shown the kind of determination he could respect. Yet there was something different about her, something that went beyond the desperation in her voice. There was courage there too, a kind of quiet strength that spoke of resilience despite her vulnerable state. She dropped to her knees, her hands clasped tightly together, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. "Please, I'll do anything, just let me stay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be on the road anymore. I just want to be safe." The rancher's expression softened slightly, though he did not speak. He crossed his arms and leaned against the fence post, thinking. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had always prided himself on being fair but firm, and he knew that taking in a stranger carried risks. Still, there was something about her that made it impossible to turn away completely. He watched her, seeing the exhaustion in her posture, the sincerity in her gaze, and the way she had stripped herself of all pretenses just to reach him. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice calm but steady. "If you're going to stay here, you'll have to work. This is not a place for idleness or complaints. The work is hard, and I don't make exceptions." Her eyes lit up with relief and a small, grateful smile formed on her lips. "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll do whatever it takes," she said earnestly. "I won't complain, I'll work hard, you won't regret it." He studied her for another moment, then nodded slightly. "All right. You can stay, but the stable will be your sleeping place for now. You'll have food, but it won't be fancy. You'll learn to take care of the animals, the land, and yourself. Can you handle that?" "I can," she said immediately, her voice filled with determination. "I'll handle anything. Thank you so much." The rancher gave a curt nod and turned his attention back to the fields, signaling that the conversation was over. She stood up, feeling a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. She had made it. She had a place, however modest, where she could rest, eat, and work. But she also knew that nothing would come easily. She would have to prove herself every day, earn the trust of the rancher, and adapt to the harsh realities of life on a ranch. As she walked toward the stable, she glanced back at the main house one last time. The morning sun cast long shadows across the land, and she felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she could feel safe, where she could contribute, and where she might even find a sense of belonging. The stable was modest but clean, filled with the soft smell of hay and the faint warmth of the animals that had already begun their day. She knelt down and touched the hay, feeling the reality of her new life settle in. She could hear the horses shifting in their stalls, their gentle movements a reminder that she was no longer alone in the world. As she began to unpack the small bundle of belongings she had carried with her, she thought about the road that had brought her here, the long walks, the uncertainty, and the fear that had threatened to overwhelm her. She realized that every step, every hardship had led her to this place. And while she knew the days ahead would be difficult, she also understood that this ranch, and this rancher, offered her a chance to rebuild, to find purpose, and to prove that she was stronger than anyone had believed. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, she finished tending to the animals and stepped outside. The ranch stretched out before her, vast and beautiful in its simplicity. She could hear the distant call of the wind through the trees and the soft rustle of grass in the fields. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. The rancher appeared at the edge of the stable, his silhouette outlined against the fading light. He didn't say much, only nodded in her direction, acknowledging her efforts for the day. She returned the nod with a small, shy smile. There was no need for words. Both of them understood that trust and respect were being built slowly, quietly, and that the first steps toward a new life had already begun. That night, as she lay on the simple bedding in the stable, listening to the soft breathing of the horses nearby, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had come here with nothing but hope and determination, and for the first time, that hope felt real. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that she had taken the first step towards safety, stability, and maybe, just maybe, a life she could be proud of. As the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. No matter what challenges came next, she would work hard, she would endure, and she would do everything she could to earn a place in this world and in the heart of the rancher who had given her this chance. And with that thought, she closed her eyes, letting sleep take her for the first time in many nights, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and the next chapter of her life on the ranch. The next morning, she woke up to the soft sound of the horses shifting in their stalls. The early light streamed through the small stable windows, casting golden streaks across the hay. She stretched her aching muscles, feeling the soreness from the long walk yesterday, but also from the unfamiliar work of tending to the animals. She had expected the ranch to be hard work, but nothing had prepared her for the intensity of it. She quickly ate a small breakfast she had prepared from the provisions the rancher had left, and then headed outside. The ranch was already alive with activity. Horses pawed at the ground, waiting to be fed, while chickens clucked as they pecked around the yard. The rancher was in the field, checking the fences and preparing tools for the day's work. She approached him quietly, hoping not to disturb his routine. "Good morning," she said softly. He glanced at her, nodding briefly. "Morning. Feed the horses first. Then check the chickens and make sure the water troughs are full. We have a long day ahead." "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the nervous excitement she felt. She had learned quickly that life on the ranch demanded respect, hard work, and patience. Words alone would not earn her a place here. Actions would. She moved quickly, carrying buckets of feed to each stall. The horses watched her with curious eyes as she poured the oats into their troughs. Some nudged her gently with their noses, and she laughed quietly, the sound mingling with the soft morning breeze. She had never worked with horses like this before, and she felt a mix of fear and awe. They were powerful creatures, and she had to be careful not to startle them. But she had an instinctive calm around them, which she hoped the rancher had noticed. Once the horses were fed, she turned to the chickens, scattering grain across the yard and checking each coop. She cleaned up the water troughs, making sure the animals had fresh, cool water. By the time she was finished, the sun had risen higher and the air was already warm. Her hands were raw from the chores and her back ached, but she felt a quiet sense of pride. She was earning her place, step by step. The rancher watched from a distance, his arms crossed. He was a man who rarely praised words, but actions spoke loudly to him. He noticed how carefully she handled the animals, how she remembered their needs, and how she worked tirelessly without complaint. There was a determination in her that reminded him of the work ethic he had cultivated in his own family over the years. He had not expected a stranger to adapt so quickly, and yet here she was, moving through the ranch as if she belonged. As the day went on, she moved from task to task. She helped mend fences that had been damaged by a recent storm, carrying heavy posts and hammering nails with a precision she did not know she possessed. She cleared weeds from the fields, her hands blistered but steady. She carried buckets of water to the vegetable garden, watered the plants, and made sure everything was in order. Every chore, no matter how small or difficult, she approached with the same determination. During a brief break, she sat on a fence post, wiping sweat from her brow. She glanced at the rancher, who was repairing a section of the barn roof. He noticed her watching him and gave a small nod, as if acknowledging her effort. That simple gesture filled her with a sense of accomplishment. He was not a man to hand out praise easily, and yet his nod felt like approval, a sign that she was on the right path. The hours passed quickly, and she began to understand the rhythm of ranch life. It was not just work. It was a way of living, a connection to the land and the animals that required respect and patience. She felt herself becoming part of something larger than herself, a part of a life that demanded effort but also offered rewards in quiet, unexpected ways. By late afternoon, she was exhausted. Her muscles ached and her hands were sore, but she had completed every task given to her. The rancher approached her, walking slowly through the yard. "You're doing well," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Most people would have given up by now. You haven't. That counts for a lot." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, sir. I just want to be useful. I want to prove that I can stay here, that I can work hard." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Keep this up, and you'll find that the ranch will respect you as much as you respect it. Work isn't easy here, but it's honest, and there's nothing more valuable than that." She spent the next few weeks settling into her routine. Each day brought new challenges. Some days were easy, filled with simple chores and quiet moments tending to the animals. Other days tested her strength, like when a stubborn horse refused to cooperate, or when a fence post broke unexpectedly, threatening to spill feed across the yard. She learned to face these obstacles with patience and persistence, realizing that the rancher was teaching her more than just chores. He was teaching her resilience, responsibility, and the value of steady effort. During these weeks, small moments of connection began to emerge. She would find herself laughing quietly when a horse misbehaved, and the rancher would occasionally watch her with a faint smile, though he never said much. Sometimes, they worked side by side, passing tools or sharing a quiet word about the task at hand. These moments were brief, but they were meaningful, building trust in ways that words alone could not. There were evenings when she would sit outside the stable after her chores, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch settling for the night. The wind would rustle through the trees, the horses would shift in their stalls, and the distant calls of the wildlife created a peaceful rhythm. She began to feel a sense of belonging she had not experienced before. This place, which had seemed so intimidating at first, was slowly becoming a home. She also began to notice the subtle ways the rancher showed his trust. He allowed her to handle tasks on her own, letting her make decisions about the care of the animals and the order of chores. He would offer advice when necessary, but he did not hover. She realized that trust was not given lightly, and she valued it deeply. Each day, she worked to prove that his faith in her was well placed. One morning, a young foal had been left alone in the field, separated from its mother. Panic rose in her chest as she ran to guide the foal back safely. The rancher followed, watching silently as she coaxed the young horse, her voice calm and steady, her movements gentle yet confident. The foal eventually followed her, and she led it safely back to the mare. The rancher's eyes softened as he observed her, realizing that her dedication went beyond mere duty. It was genuine care, an instinctive connection to the animals she tended. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She was tired, her body sore, but her spirit was light. She had faced challenges, learned new skills, and had begun to earn the respect of the rancher. Each day on the ranch was a step forward, a chance to prove her worth and to create a new life for herself. That night, as she lay in the stable, listening to the quiet breathing of the horses, she reflected on her journey so far. She had come here desperate and alone, unsure if she would be accepted, and yet she had found a place where her efforts mattered. The ranch was not just a physical space. It was a symbol of possibility, a place where hard work and determination could create stability, respect, and even a sense of family. She thought about the rancher, the quiet, strong man who had given her a chance when no one else would. She admired his strength, his fairness, and his ability to remain calm in the face of challenges. She knew that winning his trust was only the beginning, but she felt hopeful that, with continued effort, she could prove herself worthy not only of the ranch, but also of the respect and connection that had begun to grow between them. As sleep overtook her, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would continue to work hard, to learn, and to grow. She would face every challenge with determination and patience. And most importantly, she would honor the trust that had been placed in her, understanding that her new life on the ranch was not just about survival. It was about building something meaningful, with care, respect, and unwavering effort. One morning, just as the sun began to rise, the ranch was already alive with movement. The horses were restless, the chickens clucking loudly, and the wind carried the familiar scents of hay and earth. She had barely finished feeding the animals when she noticed the rancher looking worried as he examined one of the fences near the field. Something was clearly wrong. "Good morning," she said softly, approaching him. "Is everything all right?" He shook his head, his face tense. "Not exactly. Part of the fence broke overnight and some of the horses wandered near the creek. We need to fix it quickly before one of them gets hurt." Her heart quickened, knowing the danger. The horses were curious animals, and near the creek they could easily slip or injure themselves. She didn't hesitate. "I'll help. Let's get it done." They worked side by side, lifting posts, hammering nails, and securing loose boards. The rancher was impressed by her steady hands and her determination. even as the morning sun beat down on them. She moved with care, aware that even a small mistake could put the animals in danger. Sweat dripped from her brow, but she ignored it, focused entirely on the task at hand. Once the fence was repaired, they noticed that one of the older horses was limping slightly. Her stomach tightened. She knew that even a small injury could turn serious if not treated promptly. "I'll check him," she said, kneeling beside the horse. She examined his leg carefully, gently feeling for swelling or cuts. The rancher watched silently, his usual stoic expression showing a hint of admiration. The horse had a small cut near the hoof. She cleaned it carefully, applying a mixture the rancher had shown her, and wrapped it securely. She talked to the animal in a soft voice, soothing it as it shifted nervously. After a few minutes, the horse seemed calmer, and she stood up, brushing her hands against her pants. "You did well," the rancher said quietly, finally breaking the silence. "Most people would have panicked or made the injury worse. You kept calm and handled it properly." She nodded, trying to hide the small smile that tugged at her lips. Praise from him was rare, and she knew it was meaningful. "Thank you, sir. I don't want anything bad to happen to them. They trust me." The rancher gave a small nod, and for the first time that day, she saw a faint softness in his eyes. He turned and started walking toward the barn. "We've got more work to do. There's always more work on a ranch, especially when something unexpected happens." She followed, her energy renewed despite the early morning sun and the hard labor already completed. The day stretched before them, full of chores that required strength, patience, and careful attention. They fixed a broken wheelbarrow, cleaned the stables, and checked the water troughs to make sure each animal had enough to drink. Each task was exhausting, but she never complained. She had learned that hard work was part of living on the ranch, and she was determined to meet every expectation. Around midday, the rancher called her over. "I need you to help me move the hay bales to the back field. It's heavy work, but you can do it if you pace yourself." She nodded eagerly, knowing that any task, no matter how hard, was an opportunity to prove herself. Together, they lifted the bales, moving carefully to avoid strain. She could feel the sun beating down, her arms growing tired, but she ignored the discomfort. Every bale she moved was another step toward earning the rancher's trust and carving a place for herself on the ranch. By mid-afternoon, a storm began to roll in. Dark clouds gathered quickly and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain across the fields. The rancher frowned, scanning the horizon. "We need to get the animals safe before the storm hits. Move quickly." She sprang into action, helping bring the horses back into the barns and securing gates to prevent them from wandering. The chickens were moved into the coops, and the smaller animals were safely sheltered. Her heart pounded as the first drops of rain began to fall. She had never worked so fast, but the thought of the animals being hurt spurred her on. Just as the storm intensified, the rancher noticed one of the horses struggling to stay calm in the stall. He tried to steady it, but it was frightened, thrashing its head. Without thinking, she stepped in, speaking softly to the horse, her hands steady as she guided it back to safety. The rancher's eyes widened, impressed by her courage. It was dangerous. If the horse had panicked, she could have been hurt, but she remained calm, her focus entirely on helping the animal. When the horse finally settled, she stepped back, breathing heavily. The rain poured around them, but she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The rancher approached her, his expression unreadable at first. Then slowly he nodded. "You saved it. Most people would have run. You didn't. That counts for something." Her cheeks flushed, a mix of pride and relief. I couldn't let it get hurt," she said softly. He gave a brief, approving glance before turning back to the other tasks. She followed, helping secure the barn doors and checking on the remaining animals. By the time the storm passed, they were both drenched, exhausted, and covered in mud. Yet there was a quiet satisfaction in the air. The ranch had survived the storm, and they had both worked together to keep it safe. As the sky cleared and the sun began to peek through the clouds, the rancher finally spoke more than he had all day. "You have a strong spirit. You don't give up even when it's hard. That's rare and it's something I respect." She looked at him, her chest swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I want to help. I want to do my best." He nodded, as if acknowledging the truth in her words. "Keep this up and you'll be more than just someone who works here. You'll be part of this place. But remember, hard work alone isn't enough. You have to care, too, about the animals, the land, and the life you're building." She nodded, understanding the weight of his words. This ranch was not just a job, it was a life, a responsibility, and a chance to prove herself. She felt more determined than ever to meet the challenge. Over the next few days, she threw herself into her work even more. She woke early, stayed late, and made sure every task was done thoroughly. She mended fences before they broke, cleaned stalls before they became messy, and even began learning the subtle signs of the animals' moods and needs. The rancher watched her closely, noticing her dedication and patience. Slowly, he began to allow her more independence, trusting her judgment and letting her handle tasks on her own. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence alone, she noticed a young colt struggling to keep up with the herd. It was weak and frightened, and the other horses were moving ahead. Without hesitation, she guided the colt gently, encouraging it to follow while keeping it safe from harm. The rancher, who had been checking the water troughs nearby, saw her actions and felt a deep respect for her. It was clear she had a natural connection with the animals, a kindness and patience that could not be taught. As the week went on, small moments of connection began to grow between her and the rancher. He would occasionally hand her tools with a faint nod of approval or offer advice on how to handle certain tasks. Sometimes, they worked side by side in silence, the rhythm of the ranch guiding their movements. She began to feel a quiet sense of companionship, even though he rarely spoke of personal matters. Evenings were her favorite part of the day. After the animals were settled and the chores completed, she would sit outside the stable, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky would turn shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She felt a sense of peace she had never known before, a feeling that she belonged somewhere, that her efforts mattered, and that her hard work was beginning to be recognized. One night, as she was brushing down the horses, the rancher came to stand beside her quietly. "You've done well," he said softly, almost reluctantly. "I didn't expect you to adapt so quickly, and yet here you are. You've earned the trust of the ranch, and you've earned mine." Her heart lifted at his words, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. I want to keep proving that I belong here." He nodded once, then walked away, leaving her with a feeling of quiet accomplishment. She realized that her hard work, her determination, and her care for the animals were creating a place for her in this world. A place where she was not just surviving, but thriving. As she lay in the stable that night, listening to the soft breathing of the horses and reflecting on the day, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The ranch was demanding, exhausting, and sometimes frightening, but it was also a place of growth, trust, and opportunity. She had faced challenges, proven herself in small ways, and earned a place in the heart of the ranch. And she knew, with certainty, that the journey ahead would continue to test her, but also reward her in ways she had never imagined. The days on the ranch had begun to blur together, each one filled with hard work, challenges, and small victories. She woke up before sunrise every morning, moving quickly to feed the animals, tend the crops, and prepare for whatever the day might bring. The rancher, who had once watched her closely with cautious scrutiny, now allowed her more independence. He trusted her judgment, valued her effort, and though he rarely admitted it aloud, had begun to notice the care she showed, not only for the animals but for the ranch itself. She had grown stronger, more confident in her abilities. She could lift heavy bales of hay without wincing, guide stubborn horses with calm authority, and repair fences quickly and efficiently. Yet with all the work and responsibility, she had also begun to notice the quiet moments, the small interactions with the rancher that made her heart beat a little faster. A glance across the field as they worked together, a rare smile when he approved of her handling of the animals, the way he would sometimes offer advice that showed he believed in her. These moments stirred feelings she hadn't expected. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, she and the rancher were repairing a broken section of fence along the pasture. The wood was heavy and the ground uneven, but they worked side by side in silence. Occasionally, their hands brushed as they passed tools, sending small, electric jolts through her body. She felt her cheeks warm but quickly focused on the task at hand, reminding herself that this was not a place for distractions. "Careful with that post," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "If it slips, it could hurt you." "I've got it," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I can handle it." He studied her for a moment, then nodded, returning to his own work. She noticed how his gaze lingered briefly before he looked away. It was subtle, but it made her heart skip. For the first time, she realized that their relationship was changing. It was no longer just about survival or work. There was a connection forming, quiet but undeniable, built on trust, respect, and shared effort. After the fence was repaired, they stood back to admire their work. The pasture was secure, the horses safely grazing nearby, and the sun was casting golden light across the fields. She felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, but also a twinge of nervous anticipation. She wanted to say something, to express the feelings that had been growing inside her for weeks, but words seemed fragile compared to the strength of her emotions. That evening, after the chores were completed and the animals settled, she stayed behind in the barn to brush down the horses. The rancher had already returned to the house, but she felt a quiet need to reflect, to be alone with her thoughts. As she ran her hands over the horses' coats, she thought about everything that had happened since she first arrived, the fear, the exhaustion, the challenges, and the small victories. She had come to the ranch desperate and alone, and now she felt like she belonged. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of the animals. She took a deep breath, letting the calm settle over her. But even in the quiet, her thoughts kept returning to the rancher, the way he watched her work, the rare but meaningful words of approval, the unspoken concern that sometimes crossed his features. She realized that she cared for him more deeply than she had anticipated. It wasn't just gratitude for taking her in. It was something stronger, something that made her heart ache with longing. A few days later, an unexpected task arose. A shipment of supplies had arrived late, and she was asked to help move them from the wagon to the storage shed. The boxes were heavy and the work was tiring, but she did not complain. The rancher worked alongside her, lifting crates and stacking them neatly. As they worked, they shared brief conversations, talking about the tasks, the animals, and the land. Each word, though simple, carried a weight of trust and mutual respect. During a short break, she sat on a crate, wiping sweat from her brow. The rancher stood nearby, drinking from a canteen. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. She felt a surge of courage and spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "Sir, I want to thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just for letting me stay here, but for trusting me, for believing that I can do this." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You've earned it," he said simply. "It's not given lightly. You've shown dedication, patience, and skill. Most people don't last here." "You have." Her heart lifted at his words and a small smile appeared on her lips. I want to do my best. I want to be someone you can count on, someone who belongs here." He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the truth in her words. There was a pause, a quiet moment where the air seemed charged with unspoken feelings. She realized that she could no longer hide what was growing inside her. She had spent weeks proving her worth through work, through patience, through care, and now she felt ready to express something deeper. That night, after the animals were settled and the chores completed, she approached the rancher's house. She hesitated at the door, her heart pounding, but she could not turn back. She knocked softly. "Come in," his voice called from inside. She stepped into the warm, modest house, the smell of cooking and wood filling the space. He looked up from his seat at the table, surprised to see her standing there. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone gentle. She took a deep breath, summoning all the courage she had. "Sir, I need to tell you something. I've been here for weeks now. I've worked hard and I've done my best, but it's more than that. I care about you. I want to be more than someone who works here. I want to be your wife. I'll do anything at all to be with you, to stay here, to build a life with you." The rancher froze, caught off guard by her confession. He had sensed a bond growing, a closeness between them, but hearing her words so openly stirred something deep inside him. He looked at her, studying her face, the honesty and vulnerability shining in her eyes. It was clear that she was not speaking lightly. Every word carried her heart. I didn't expect this," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "You're brave and you've worked hard, but this is sudden. We've built trust, yes, but marriage, it's serious. It's a commitment. Are you sure this is what you want?" She nodded quickly, her eyes shining. "I am sure. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I care for you, sir. I want to spend my life here with you, helping on the ranch, taking care of the animals, building something together. I don't need fancy things. I just want to be part of your life." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He had never met anyone like her, someone who had arrived desperate and alone, and yet had proven herself through courage, resilience, and unwavering effort. Her honesty, her dedication, and her care for the ranch and the animals had earned his respect, and now her confession had earned something even deeper: his attention, his reflection, and perhaps the stirrings of affection he had been trying to ignore. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. The air was quiet, filled with the sounds of the ranch beyond the walls, the soft rustle of wind, the distant calls of the animals settling in for the night. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "You've worked hard and you've proven yourself in every way. You've earned my trust and my respect. I need time to think about everything, but I see your heart. I see your honesty, and I won't forget it." She smiled, relief and hope mingling in her chest. "That's all I ask. Just know how I feel." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I do, and that counts for something." As she returned to the stable that night, her heart was lighter than it had been in weeks. She had spoken her truth, and even if the future was uncertain, she felt proud of her courage. The bond between her and the rancher had deepened, built on trust, respect, and now honesty. She knew that love, like the ranch, required care, effort, and patience, and she was ready for it. Lying on the hay in the stable, listening to the soft breathing of the horses, she thought about the days ahead. There would be more challenges, more work, and more lessons to learn. But she also knew that her feelings were no longer hidden, and that the rancher had at least glimpsed the depth of her heart. And with that thought, she closed her eyes, letting sleep carry her into the night, dreaming of a life filled with hard work, trust, and the possibility of love. The days that followed her confession were filled with a quiet tension, a mix of anticipation, reflection, and hope. She continued her work on the ranch, tending to the animals, mending fences, and helping wherever needed. Every movement, every action carried a new layer of purpose. She wanted to show that her feelings were not fleeting, that her devotion to the ranch and to the rancher was genuine. She worked harder than ever, not just for survival, but for love, trust, and belonging. The rancher, meanwhile, spent long hours observing her, reflecting on his own feelings. He had always respected her strength, her determination, and her natural ability to care for the animals. but her confession had stirred something deeper. He realized that over the past weeks, he had grown accustomed to her presence, relied on her judgment, and admired the unwavering courage she showed each day. Her honesty had touched him in a way that words or simple gestures never could. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high and the ranch stretched in warm light, he approached her while she was feeding the horses. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone quiet but deliberate, "about what you said about wanting to be my wife." She paused, her hands frozen mid-motion, hope and anxiety fighting within her chest. "Yes," she asked softly, trying not to reveal the eagerness in her voice. "I wasn't sure at first," he continued, "because this isn't a decision to take lightly. Marriage, a partnership, it's about trust, respect, and shared life. You've shown me all of those things and more. You've proven yourself not just through words but through your actions. You care about this ranch, the animals, and the life we lead here. That means a great deal to me." Her heart swelled and a small, hopeful smile touched her lips. "Sir, I thank you. That's all I ever wanted, to show you I care, that I can belong here." He looked at her steadily, and in that moment she saw the warmth in his eyes, the recognition that he had come to rely on her, admire her, and perhaps even care for her in a way he had never expected. "You've earned more than a place on this ranch," he said quietly. "You've earned a place in my life." Her chest tightened with emotion, a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. She had never imagined that her desperate plea months ago would lead to this moment, a moment where she was not only accepted but valued, not only safe but loved. The weeks that followed were filled with a different rhythm. Work continued, as it always did on the ranch, but there was a new sense of closeness between them. They shared small moments, preparing meals together, repairing fences side by side, and sometimes sitting quietly on the porch at the end of the day, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Words were few, but glances, gestures, and shared effort spoke volumes. She felt a sense of belonging she had never known before, and he, in turn, began to allow himself to enjoy her presence, her laughter, and her quiet strength. One evening, after the animals had been settled and the chores were complete, the rancher called her over to the porch. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of the ranch winding down for the night. He gestured toward the fields and the animals, now calm and secure. "This place, it's thriving," he said, his voice steady. "And a large part of that is because of you. You've worked hard, you've cared, and you've shown loyalty that's rare. I want you to know that I see all of it and I appreciate it. You're not just someone who works here, you're part of this life and part of me." Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of happiness and gratitude. "I feel the same way, sir. This ranch, it's my home. And you've given me a place to belong, a reason to keep going, and a life I never imagined I could have." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable, then slowly extended his hand. "If you truly want this, if you want to be here to build a life together, I want you to know that I'm ready. I'll stand beside you as a partner, as someone who cares, and as someone who's proud to call you mine." She took his hand without hesitation, feeling the strength in his grip, the steady warmth in his touch. "Yes," she whispered, "I want that more than anything. I'll stay. I'll work. I'll be by your side, always." The decision was mutual, spoken not just in words but in action. Over the next days, they began preparing for a new chapter, one where their partnership extended beyond work and trust into a life shared together. The ranch became more than a place to survive. It became a home, filled with purpose, care, and the quiet comfort of shared responsibility. The community began to notice the bond between them. Neighbors, once indifferent or curious about the young woman who had arrived so desperately, now saw her as part of the ranch and part of the man they respected. She was no longer an outsider. She was a trusted member of the ranching life, admired for her courage, patience, and kindness. One day, as they worked together repairing a fence in the back pasture, he paused and looked at her. "I think the horses like having you around as much as I do," he said with a faint smile. She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think they do, and I like being around them and around you." He met her gaze, and for the first time he allowed himself to truly express what he felt. "I'm glad you're here. I can't imagine this ranch without you." Her heart leapt, and she felt a warmth that spread through her entire body. It wasn't just love. It was trust, respect, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that her hard work, courage, and honesty had created something lasting. As the seasons changed, their life together on the ranch grew richer and more fulfilling. They shared quiet mornings feeding the animals, long afternoons repairing fences or tending the crops, and evenings watching the sunset over the fields. Their relationship, built on trust, respect, and shared effort, deepened with each passing day. She had found not only safety and belonging but a partner who valued her, respected her, and cared for her deeply. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. The animals were healthy and well cared for, the fields produced strong crops, and the fences and barns were sturdy and well maintained. But more than that, the ranch became a place of warmth and home, a symbol of what could be built through dedication, patience, and shared purpose. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of gold and orange, they stood side by side on the porch, looking over the fields. The horses grazed peacefully, and the gentle wind carried the scent of hay and earth. She leaned slightly against him, feeling the steady strength in his side. "This," she said softly, "is everything I ever hoped for. A home, a life I can be proud of, and someone I can trust with my heart." He placed a hand over hers, his voice quiet but steady. "And you've given me the same. A partner, someone I can rely on, and a life that feels complete. I can't promise it will always be easy, but I can promise we'll face it together." She smiled, feeling tears of happiness in her eyes. "Together," she agreed, knowing that their partnership, built on trust, hard work, and honesty, would endure whatever challenges came their way. As the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle above the ranch, they stood quietly, hands entwined, hearts connected, and the world around them peaceful and calm. The journey had not been easy. There had been fear, desperation, and countless challenges, but it had led them here, to a life filled with purpose, respect, and love. And in that quiet moment, with the ranch stretching out before them, they both knew that this was only the beginning of a shared life, one built on courage, trust, and the unwavering knowledge that no matter what came next, they would face it together, side by side, heart to heart.